Chapter 1642. Duan Tiansong's voice had become calm and peaceful. He no longer had the viciousness and craziness from before. Your sword intent is really strange. It makes me feel lonely and lonely. Duan Tiansong looked at Gu Duxing with a smile. Especially after the sword, I felt even more sad and lonely. He sighed sincerely. Good swordsmanship. Legend Tribulation certainly lives up to its name. Brother Tribulation is invincible. I finally experienced it myself today. He was full of praise. Not only was he not angry, he was instead filled with some kind of relief. Gu Duxing was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You didn't use your full strength, especially in the last fight." Duan Tiansong shook his head. "It's not that I didn't want to, but I really couldn't. Although the demonic aura can increase the power of martial techniques, I've had too little contact with it after all. I haven't completely integrated it into my 10,000 years of habits. So I definitely didn't show mercy just now. In fact, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do it." He laughed bitterly. "Because at that time, I still couldn't control myself." "Then why are you now?" Gu Duxing asked with some surprise. He was surprised at the enemy's change. Why did it seem like he was completely demonic? "Because I'm already dead." Duan Tiansong smiled calmly. "Nothing matters in life except death." I, Duan Tiansong, finally understand the true meaning of this sentence today. Once you've seen through life and death, what's there to be afraid of? So now he can't control me anymore. I'm finally me again. I'm no longer a demonic puppet. He looked at the battle between Dong Wuxiang and Zhu Hehe in a daze. He laughed self-deprecatingly and said, "In the past, I always said that death isn't scary. But for those who are truly alive, there's no one who can see through the word death. Since ancient times, the only difficult thing is death. It turns out that death is ultimately so difficult." He looked at Gu Duxing calmly and said, "Gu Duxing, your swordsmanship has already reached a higher level and is about to reach the peak. You've already gone further than me. Before I die, I have nothing to tell you because you've already surpassed me. However, I still want to tell you something." It was a sentence about martial arts. "It's also the only realization I have after death." Gu Duxing said seriously, "Please enlighten me." After a moment of silence, Duan Tiansong finally said word by word, "Life and death. The mortal battlefield is the best place for you to go. After seeing through death, one's swordsmanship should be able to achieve small accomplishment. Then if one were to see through life, one would be able to achieve great accomplishment." Everyone could talk about this principle, but it was difficult to achieve it. I've never been able to see through it. Even now, I still haven't been able to see through death. Even in death, I still haven't been able to see through it. Because death is, after all, an external force, and not one's own state of mind. Remember life and death. It was a kind of realm. It's not just about living or dying. Duan Tiansong said softly. Gu Duxing murmured in a low voice. Life and death are a kind of realm. It's not as simple as living or dying. After pondering for a long time, he said, "I'll remember it. I don't really understand it yet, but I'm going to try and explore. Thank you for your advice." "You're welcome." Duan Tiansong let out a long sigh. "In the future, when you see people like us, I will ask you for one thing on their behalf." Gu Duxing said respectfully, "Please speak. As fast as you can. Kill them." Duan Tiansong smiled warmly. "The faster you die, the more likely you will be able to preserve your reputation. You know what I mean?" Gu Duxing nodded slowly. "I'll remember it. If it's possible, I'll do my best." Duan Tiansong nodded and smiled. He stood in the air with his hands behind his back, watching the battle between Dong Wuxiang and Zhu Hehe. He said dispassionately, "I'll wait for my brother. With a companion in the netherworld, I won't be alone. We brothers have walked together for 10,000 years, never abandoning each other in life and death. But at the last moment, we almost broke that spirit of brotherhood. This is what I should thank you for the most. That sword of yours gave me this last moment of clarity." On the other side, Dong Wuxiang had obviously gained an overwhelming advantage. He forced Zhu Hehe to clash head-on with his saber strike after strike. With every strike, both of them would spit out blood at the same time. It was an extremely barbaric fight. It was a head-on collision. There were no tricks involved in the fight. At this moment, both of them were clearly enraged. Their eyes were red, and there was no need for dodging at all. They could only clash head-on. The empty space was shattered piece by piece. The next moment, it was reassembled, and the next moment, it was shattered again. The cycle was endless. The place where the two of them fought was already thousands of feet high in the air. Below the place where they fought, the whole place was shaking. The two of them shook violently, causing their bodies to sway. After such a battle, Zhu Hehe's side has recovered a little bit of his sanity. Duan Tiansong was relieved. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen such a suicidal way of fighting. If he really fought in a clear-headed state, your companion's strength is too great. He was born a hero, so he neglected techniques. So even if he could win in the end, he would still have to pay a considerable price. His fighting style is too simple, so simple that it's regrettable. Gu Duxing nodded seriously. I'll pass on your words to Dong Wuxiang seriously. Duan Tiansong nodded with a smile. Finally, Dong Wuxiang let out a fierce roar. Holding the saber with both his hands, which had already split open, he slashed at Zhu Hehe, dripping with blood. What a powerful and domineering slash. That was a slash, and also a slash that cut through everything. Poof! Zhu Hehe's demonic saber could no longer bear it, and shattered in an instant. The demonic saber, which was already riddled with holes and fragmented from the continuous collisions, finally couldn't bear the strongest and fiercest impact. Before the final collision even hit, it had already shattered completely. Dong Wuxiang's dark saber was like lightning and thunder, slashing wildly at Zhu Hehe. Zhu Hehe's twisted face suddenly revealed a peaceful smile. He actually stood with his hands clasped behind his back, facing Dong Wuxiang's saber without dodging. His face was calm. Stop! Duan Tiansong shouted. Stop! Gu Duxing shouted to stop him. Dong Wuxiang was shocked when he heard that. He pulled back his saber with all his strength. However, the saber energy that had left the saber couldn't be stopped. The biting cold saber energy had already passed through Zhu Hehe's body. Zhu Hehe's expression gradually calmed down. He maintained his unmoving figure. He could clearly feel the sharp saber energy cutting through his heart meridians. The expression on his face finally changed again. The originally calm expression became more and more relaxed. There was even a kind of carefree feeling of waking up from a nightmare and finally being free. Zhu Hehe, who had finally broken free from the demonic shackles and was about to die, no longer looked at Dong Wuxiang. Instead, he turned around and floated toward Duan Tiansong, who was in the air. The people below were all surprised and puzzled. What was the result of this battle? It looked like Tribulation's side had won a complete victory. But why did the victors, Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing, look a little sad, while the two losers, Duan Tiansong and Zhu Hehe, look a little happy? They were no longer as violent and ferocious as they were at the beginning. The winner didn't win, and the loser didn't lose. What happened between the Ghost Sword, and the Devil Sword, and the Tribulation Sword Supreme? In a flash, Zhu Hehe had already arrived in front of Duan Tiansong. The two of them looked at each other deeply, and smiled at the same time. Fortunately, although we were plotted against, we didn't make a big mistake. This is God's favor to us. Yes, you're still you, and I'm still me. Yes, this is indeed our fortune. The two of them spoke very softly. The words that came from one's mouth entered the other's ears. The rest was blown away by the high-altitude hurricane. In the surging wind, the clothes and hair of the two of them fluttered in the wind. The smiles on their faces were warm and sincere, as if they were red. Duan Tiansong's calm and relaxed face gradually turned pale. A touch of pain finally appeared on his face. It was the same for Zhu Hehe on the opposite side. This was the price to pay for breaking free from the demonic shackles. Only with the price of life could one break free from the demonic shackles. Even if the two of them had extremely high cultivation, and could temporarily hold on to their last breath of vital energy and not die, they couldn't hold on for too long. Death was finally coming. Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing's hearts trembled. To be able to make the second-grade supreme martial artists, who had seen through life and death, feel such pain. What could it be? The expressions on their faces became more and more painful, but the joy in their eyes became more and more. Ha ha ha. Zhu Hehe suddenly trembled all over and laughed to the sky. He said loudly, I Zhu Hehe have killed countless people in my life. People call me the Devil Sword. I've killed good people and bad people. There were also many times when I killed the wrong person. But in this life of mine, I believe that I'm worthy of the title of Enforcer. I, Zhu Hehe, am known as the sword bearer of the Enforcers. I'm recognized as the executioner, and my hands are stained with blood. But still I've been cursed countless times in my life. But my reputation is even better. I'm indomitable and worthy of the title of a man. Today before I go, I almost lost my integrity. The demonic aura is still raging in my heart, but I'm already a dead man. Even if the demonic aura isn't extinguished, what can it do to me? Zhu Hehe laughed loudly. The corner of Duan Tiansong's mouth twitched, as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He just smiled and nodded repeatedly. Bright streaks of blood had already broken out of the corner of his mouth. The two of them stood side by side. Suddenly, they tried their best to straighten their bodies. It seemed that even this straightening of their bodies required a lot of effort. A thin trace of blood appeared on Duan Tiansong's throat. Faint traces of blood also appeared on his waist. And where Zhu Hehe's heart was, blood began to surge. But the two of them didn't seem to notice this at all. They straightened their bodies and bowed deeply to Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang. Thank you. My illustrious name has finally not fallen. It's all thanks to the help of the two of you. Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing only felt heartfelt sadness in their hearts. Duan Tiansong had already turned around. Enduring the pain, he said to Zhu Hehe, Brother, even if you and I die, our spirits may not be at peace. Our spirits seem to still be useful to those demons, right? Zhu Hehe suddenly realized something. He said to Dong Wuxiang and Gu Duxing, Yes, I almost forgot about this. Don't forget, you must destroy our spirits. Chapter 1643. A solemn expression appeared on Zhu Hehe's face as he said in a low voice, Once we succumb to the devil, even our spirit will lose its freedom. Even if we die, our spirit will return to the hands of those who have succumbed to the devil and become nourishment. When we succumb to the devil previously, we can no longer control our spirit completely. Even if we use the dharma of destruction of body and soul, we can only destroy the part of our spirit that we can control. As for the spirit that has already been demonized, we are already powerless to destroy it. Good people, please go all the way. Just destroy our spirit and soul, and consign us to eternal damnation. A conflicted expression appeared on Gu Duxing's face. This matter no longer concerns us. If our spirit ends up benefiting the extraterrestrial demons, it will only harm more lives in the world. Duan Tiansong said weakly, Lord Gu, there is a knife above the word tolerance. Tolerance is multifaceted. If you can't bear it now, you are being cruel to us and to the world. If you are cruel to us now, you are being cruel to the world and to yourself. If you allow our spirit to strengthen the extraterrestrial demons, the two of us will truly die with regrets. Please fulfill my wish, I beg you. All right. On behalf of the world, I thank the two seniors for their kindness. Gu Duxing said decisively, When this matter is over, I will personally erect a memorial tablet for the two seniors. It will be written, Ghost Sword and Devil Saber, rule the world. I am very relieved. The two of them smiled at the same time. They looked at each other and said at the same time, Brothers, let's go. Blood spurted out from various wounds on their bodies at the same time. Gu Duxing's last sword strike seemed casual, but in fact, it had already severed Duan Tiansong's throat and waist, cutting off his life force. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to break free from the devil's shackles on his own. As for Duan Tiansong, he was able to hold on until now because of his peerless cultivation that he had painstakingly cultivated for 10,000 years to maintain his last breath. As for Dong Wuxiang's last strike, even though he had withdrawn his saber in time, the sharp saber energy could not be withdrawn in time, especially when Zhu Hehe was still bent on seeking death. Without any resistance, the saber energy that penetrated his body had already shattered his heart meridians. The injuries of the two of them were already so severe that there was no longer any possibility of them surviving. However, the two of them barely managed to survive, because they were worried that their spirits would be used by the Dharma Supreme and the extraterrestrial demon. Although they were dead, they would still be a hindrance to the human world. But now that they had gotten Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang's promises, their minds relaxed. They didn't want to force themselves to continue walking together. Just as the two's injuries were acting up at the same time, a clear and resonant roar suddenly sounded from the center of the capital city, stirring up winds. Then, an awe-inspiring sword light soared into the sky like a bolt of lightning. It made a turn in the air, and the sword chi whistled. With the sound of wind and thunder that shook the heavens and earth, he rode on his sword and flew away at an extremely fast speed. This figure flashed across the sky at an extremely fast speed. However, it left a dazzling sword light that spanned hundreds of miles in the sky above the capital. Even after that person had left for a long time, there was still no sign of it disappearing. What a sharp sword! Duan Tiansong's dimmed eyes suddenly brightened. He asked in a weak voice, "Was it the Tribulation Sword Master who just passed by?" Gu Duxing said, "It was Big Brother Chu. I didn't expect that we would be able to witness the Tribulation Sword Master's majesty before we die." Duan Tiansong and Zhu Hihi smiled in relief. "We have no more regrets in this life." Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang didn't reply. The bodies of these two were already torn apart in the air, and they died with their bodies dismembered. The last words of their lives came from Zhu Hihi's mouth. "The demonic saber may be called a demon, but my heart is not a demon. Sirs, please don't forget to destroy our spirits. Even if we die, we won't be used by the demon." Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang's expressions were solemn and serious. They said, "Rest assured, seniors. Our names will last for eternity." A saber and a sword, mixed with the top-grade spirits of Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang, came crashing down violently. After the death of Duan Tiansong and Zhu Hihi, their spirits dissipated into the world in an instant, forever annihilated. Clouds and mist drifted. It was as if they could still vaguely see the gratified smiles of those two. But after that, their life marks completely dissipated into the world. Gu Duxing held his sword and bowed. Dong Wuxiang stood respectfully with his saber in hand, paying the highest respect to these two law enforcement seniors. Both of their hearts were heavy. The demonic saber, "My heart is not a demon." Such a hero. But he was plotted against by the Dharma Supreme. At this moment, Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang's hatred was overwhelming. There had never been a time when they wanted to kill someone so badly. The Dharma Supreme. "You really deserve to die." After a while, Gu Duxing seriously cleaned up the remains of the two seniors. Only then did he calm down and said, "The one who went by just now was obviously boss. He left in such a hurry. Did something happen over there? Let's go over and take a look too. We can help out a little," Dong Wuxiang suggested. Gu Duxing nodded. The two of them called out to their brothers and directly flew up on their swords. They turned into flowing light and disappeared into the north. After a long time, in the capital below, the crowd of petrified spectators finally regained their ability to move. Everyone was discussing animatedly. Tribulation Sword Master and Tribulation made their first high-profile appearance under this sky. The shock they left in the world was really unparalleled. The law enforcement supreme martial artists who had been law enforcement officers for 10,000 years actually died in the hands of Tribulation's brothers in a one-on-one battle. Although this fact had long been expected, Tribulation was invincible in the world. But similarly, it was even more unexpected. After all, they were still so young. Tribulation is indeed worthy of his reputation. He's really amazing. Yes, I really didn't expect that they could really kill a low-level supreme martial artist. Although I've heard that Tribulation was invincible in the world as one, but it still feels a little like a dream. It's just a pity for the two seniors, Ghost Sword and Devil Saber. Sigh, although they were enemies with Tribulation, I've never heard of any major misdeeds in their lives. Today they died just like that. I just feel sigh. Yes, it's really a pity. Duan Tiansong and the rest didn't talk loudly in the sky. Apart from the high-level martial artists who had reached a certain level of cultivation and were at least 5th-grade supreme martial artists, the rest of the people below couldn't hear it. Those few who heard it had a look of sadness on their faces, But absolutely no one said the truth. Everyone made a decision at the same time. Keep their mouths shut. This matter concerned the reputation of the two seniors, Ghost Sword and Devil Saber. No one could bear to say that they were controlled by the extraterrestrial demon after their deaths. That would be a betrayal of conscience. This truth could only be written on a monument for Ghost Sword and Devil Saber, after they killed the extraterrestrial demon, and wrote died in battle with the extraterrestrial demon. But if anyone said it now, the result would be certain. They wouldn't be able to live past today. Hundreds of miles away, the Dharma Supreme suddenly stopped in his tracks. His eyes turned into two black holes as he stared at the void in front of him, his long hair fluttering without wind. After a long time, he gritted his teeth and said, "How can this be? Can he temporarily keep his mind clear, just because he has returned to the dead? He can actually reject the call of my demonic seed, and abandon my extraterrestrial demon order. What a bastard! He's dead, and he still wants to set me up. Damn it!" He turned and left. Duan Tiansong and Zhu Hehe had awakened at the last moment. Their divine bodies had dissipated, and they had disappeared from the world forever. But this also made it impossible for the Dharma Supreme to receive the power from the demonic spirit. "I have urgent matters to attend to." Xu Yang only had time to say these words before he suddenly broke through the roof of the inn on his flying sword. Then he broke through the sky like a thunderbolt. Chapter 1644. Huang Xiaoliu and the experts of the Huang clan who heard the noise and came out to watch didn't discover anything. They only had time to see the big hole on the top of their heads. Mo Tianji's slender figure flashed and appeared where Chu Yang was standing. He frowned and said, "What happened? What can happen at this moment? How would Huang Xiaoliu and the others know what happened?" Upon hearing this question, they couldn't help but shake their heads blankly. Mo Tianji tightly knitted his brows. What is it that could make Chu Yang so impatient to go there? And he didn't even have time to inform us? He wanted to use the World Master to check the secrets of heaven, but he had just used his heart's blood. Although he had already used heavy pills to make up for it, if he were to trigger a backlash from the secrets of heaven, he would easily die. Mo Tianji frowned and forced himself to calm down. He thought, no matter what, Chu Yang will definitely send back news once he goes. Let's stay calm for the time being and adapt to the situation. After a while, he felt that his brothers were chasing after Chu Yang. He couldn't help but feel relieved. With these people gathered together, even if they were to face the joint forces of the Heavenly Demon and the Dharma Supreme, they should be able to protect themselves. Tan Tan's side had already reached a critical moment. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his life was at risk. As for Wei Tan Tan, and the strongest lineup of the 3 Stars Divine Clan, were still in a desperate situation. The reason was very simple. The Heavenly Demon, who had recovered a lot of his strength, was really too strong. He was so strong that he had far surpassed the limits of the Heavenly Layer practitioners. To put it bluntly, with the Heavenly Demon's current strength, he was definitely invincible in the Heavenly Layer. Unless Zi Xiecheng reappeared, there would be no chance of defeating the enemy. Moreover, it was calculated with the current Heavenly Demon. If he really recovered to his peak state, even Zi Xiecheng might reappear. He wouldn't be able to handle it. Previously, when Tan Tan used his strongest move and shouted, "Help!" Not to mention the elders of the 3 Stars Divine Clan, even the Heavenly Demon was about to collapse. As a peak-level supreme martial artist, as the leader of a clan, as the owner of the supreme demon body, as a self-proclaimed demon king, as in short, no matter which identity he had, Master Tan, who had many high-level identities, didn't seem to have a reason to shout for help. But he still shouted. Moreover, he shouted it with righteousness and confidence. His voice was like a great bell, and the sound lingered in the air for 3 days. His voice shook 1,000 miles. The Heavenly Demon could not understand this. He said angrily, "As the leader of a race and the strongest of the current generation, he is the leader of a race. You're shameless. You still have the nerve to call yourself the Great Demon King? Giving the Supreme Demon body to you is simply a waste." Bah! Tan Tan angrily said, "You spat on me? I'm the one who spat at you. Are you out of your mind?" Is your reputation or your life more important? Looking at you, it seems like you've lived for a long time. Have you been living like a dog? How could he not understand such a simple logic? You dare to come out and mess around. I really don't know how you managed to survive until now. Are you too lucky? Or are your enemies too unlucky? The heavenly demon was speechless. Talking to this little normal was definitely asking for trouble. This was definitely a mischievous guy who never played his cards rationally. For such people, it was more important to get rid of them as soon as possible. The sooner the better. The most important thing was that this was the supreme demon body. It was almost the legendary ultimate demon body. This was an extremely good thing that even the top-notch heavenly demon seniors yearned to obtain. In the entire heavenly demon clan, only a few people above the heavenly demon king could possess the supreme demon body. Today, such a good thing had fallen from the sky and landed on his head. The series of bad luck that he had encountered previously was not a problem at all. As long as he could obtain this supreme demon body, it didn't matter how unlucky he was. It didn't matter. As soon as he thought that he would be able to possess this little supreme demon body. Huh? That wouldn't be a wonderful thing. The heavenly demon looked at Tan Tan, as if a pervert had seen a beauty, or a mouse had seen rice. He was endlessly salivating. Without saying anything further, he stepped forward and attacked with all his strength. He used his greatest effort and mental strength to capture Tan Tan, as quickly as possible. He wanted to possess his body. A burst of dense demon fog suddenly spread in all directions. The entire world was almost shielded by this demon fog in an instant. The heavenly demon cackled strangely. I was merciful just now, and allowed all of you to contend with me. Now I'm going to attack with all my strength. Lower realm ant, prepare to face the consequences. The heavenly demon admitted that he had been merciful and hadn't gone all out. He wasn't praising himself against Guigu just now, because he hadn't seen through Tan Tan's physique clearly. He would definitely gain a quick victory if he went all out. However, it would also worsen his injuries. It was very likely that his injuries that had just recovered would worsen again, or even become unmanageable. But right now, with such a great temptation as the supreme demon body in front of him, why would the heavenly demon care about serious injuries? As long as he could possess this body. So what if his injuries were a little more serious? With a strange laugh, the heavenly demon's aura surged and he flew down. Tan Tan was already scared by his gaze to begin with. Seeing that he didn't care about the others at all and only attacked him, he was even more certain of something. Although this guy's demonic aura is abnormally huge, it's not as pure and authentic as mine. Could it be that he's targeting me? The thought had only just occurred to him when the other party's heavenly demon hand had already transformed into several dozen arms. They reached out menacingly from a stretch of demon fog and grabbed down at Tan Tan. In an instant, they practically sealed off all of Tan Tan's paths of retreat. Seeing this, Tan Tan didn't dare to be negligent. With a loud roar, he activated all of his cultivation and shouted, "Mountains and rivers in one hand." His right hand reached out abruptly. The entire palm was pitch black and shiny. It really had an aura, as if it was lifting up the mountains and rivers in the world, as it went up to meet the attack. The heavenly demon clicked his tongue and said, "You've got some moves. This move is quite interesting." Countless palms suddenly shook and instantly disappeared. They condensed into a single hand and came down heavily, clashing with Tan Tan's hand without any fuss. The moment the two attacks came into contact, the entire ground suddenly shook fiercely. Then it came to a standstill. The next moment, the ground within a radius of 1,000 feet was suddenly sent flying, rolling out in all directions. This clash actually really had the power to cause mountains to crumble and the earth to split. In the midst of the clash, Tan Tan let out a muffled groan. His entire body was pressed down to the ground. No matter how deep he sank, the ground around him would sink as deep as he sank. It flew out in circles. When it flew up into the air, before the first wave of soil had even landed, the second wave of soil had already flown up. In an instant, the world turned dark. Guigu and the others around them actually couldn't keep their footing, swaying left and right. Now you know how powerful it is, right? This move is the heavenly demon secret technique, Heavenly Demon descends. The heavenly demon cackled strangely. Heavenly Demon descends is naturally earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Little one, surrender now that you know how powerful it is. The title of Demon King isn't something that just anyone is worthy of. At this moment, his right hand was still pressing down on Tantan's right hand. His entire body was suspended in midair. Layers of black fog gradually rose around him. Just like that, he pressed Tantan all the way down. If not for the fact that he coveted Tantan's supreme demonic body, and didn't want Tantan's body to be damaged in any way, this attack would have been enough to smash Tantan into smithereens. Even though the heavenly demon was heavily injured, his full-powered attack at this moment was still not something that a heavenly layer martial artist could withstand. The demonic aura that Tantan possessed was much purer than his. However, the difference in their cultivation was simply too great. No matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't break free from his right hand. He could only continue being pressed down like this. In the blink of an eye, he had already sunk 1,000 feet into the ground. Wait! Tantan had to use all his strength to be able to shout. After that, he was panting like a bull. His face and ears were red. Black light shone in the heavenly demon's eyes. How is it? Little one, what do you want to say? The force on his hand relaxed a little, giving Tantan a chance to catch his breath and speak. I surrender. Tantan shouted. I admit that I can't beat you. Seeing that you don't want to kill me, I might as well surrender. Isn't this what you want? Surrender? You're saying that you want to surrender? The heavenly demon urged his hand and said, Really? Tantan suddenly felt that his whole body was about to be crushed. He reluctantly shouted, You're courting death. Quickly let go. You only need to let go. I will surrender. This demon king is the leader of the clan. I won't go back on my words. The heavenly demon snorted. He withdrew his hand and flew back. Consider yourself sensible. Since you've surrendered, don't think about. His voice hadn't faded when he saw Tantan jump out of the deep pit. His entire body was like a black light as he fled at high speed. He cursed, You're delusional. Is Old Elephant the kind of person who would surrender? His figure was already thousands of feet away in the blink of an eye. He had just said that he wouldn't go back on his words. But he had already gone back on his words in the blink of an eye. The heavenly demon was almost angered to death. He leaped and chased after him. Aren't you the leader of the clan? With such a status, you actually went back on your words. You're too despicable and shameless. Tantan sped up and retorted sarcastically. So what if I go back on my words and get fat? Anyway, I won't get fat no matter what I eat. Let's see if I can get fat by going back on my words this time. So what if I'm fooling you? Bite me then. The heavenly demon was almost driven mad by a certain someone's shameless words. Gooey goo, and the others made a big fuss as they rushed over from behind. Although the enemy they had encountered this time was simply too strong, the Divine King's life was in danger at any moment. How could they possibly stay out of this? Tantan shouted from afar. You idiots, don't follow me anymore. Hurry up and go by yourselves. I'll bring this fellow around to have some fun. If Tantan had the upper hand at this moment, Gooey Goo and the others naturally wouldn't be worried and would act according to Tantan's instructions. However, the Divine King was currently in an absolute disadvantageous situation where he could lose his life at any moment. How could they abandon him and leave? Even if they knew that they were no match for him, they had to protect him with their lives. If they could deplete a little more of the enemy's strength, they would be able to fight for a little more chance of survival for the Divine King. Gooey Goo let out a loud roar. He was the first to fly up. The other elders also flew up and surrounded the heavenly demon. Even if they had to die, they had to stall for more time, so that the Divine King could escape safely. When the heavenly demon saw that there were actually people who dared to stop him, and that Tantan was getting further and further away, he couldn't help but be enraged to the extreme. With a loud roar, endless black fog came out and spread out endlessly. All of a sudden demonic flames filled the sky. The heavenly demon attacked with all his might. Chapter 1645. Tantan almost vomited blood. Why were all his subordinates such idiots? Did they only have muscles in their heads and no brains at all? His original intention of escaping was to lure the enemy away, so that Guigu and the rest would be fine first. If he was alone, then he would be able to be much more flexible. Furthermore, seeing how the heavenly demon's attention was unusually focused on him, there must be something on him that the heavenly demon was looking forward to. Luring him away was the current highest level of strategy. Even if he ended up dying in the hands of the enemy, after all, he wouldn't have any subordinates or brothers who would die in front of him. No brothers would die because of him. To Tan Tan, or the Saint King of the Divine Clan, this was the most important point. In his previous life, the 3-star Saint King could be said to have a fresh memory of the great calamity that happened tens of thousands of years ago. Other things aside, what he couldn't accept the most was his loyal subordinates dying for him. Yet today, he had encountered such a strong enemy yet again. Yet his subordinates and brothers had once again risked their lives to fight the enemy for his survival. With a furious roar, Tan Tan turned and charged back. He charged back toward the battlefield where the heavenly demon was fighting against Guigu and the rest. His heart and blood were already boiling and burning. If I die, so be it. In any case, I won't escape even if I die this time. It's just that, Chu Yang, you mustn't come. Tan Tan charged all the way, his heart filled with endless regret. There was no other reason other than the regret he felt for that cry for help earlier. Previously, he didn't expect the enemy to be so strong that there was no chance of victory at all. Initially, he had thought that with Chu Yang and the rest here, no matter how strong the enemy was, they would be able to handle it. But from the looks of it now, the situation was very wrong. This heavenly demon was simply too strong. Even if Chu Yang and the rest could make it in time, and everyone present joined forces sincerely, they would still not be a match for this heavenly demon. This fellow's strength had clearly exceeded the limits of this space. If Chu Yang came, he would only be courting death. Therefore you mustn't come. Tan Tan Xang crazily roared. His entire body transformed into a black light and rushed into the battlefield at a very fast speed. With a flash of cold light in his sleeves, the long sword that Chu Yang had specially made for him appeared in his hand. The tip of the sword had just flashed when Tan Tan had already channeled all his energy, strength, and cultivation into it. In an instant, sword transformation thunderclap. An awe-inspiring stream of light charged towards the heavenly demon. "Oh, Saint King!" Guigu cried out loudly, his voice sorrowful. As he shouted, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. In just a short period of contact, the heavenly demon had almost turned into a monster with millions of arms. Guigu and the others didn't have the slightest intention of evading the frenzied attacks of the individuals blocking their way. Because the moment they did, the extraterrestrial demons would immediately go after Tan Tan. Everyone fought head-on without regard for anything else. However, while their fighting spirit was commendable, their cultivation was ultimately far inferior. In a short moment, everyone had been seriously injured. In fact, it was very likely that these people would have died in the next moment if Tan Tan hadn't returned in time to rescue them. Tan Tan wasn't willing to abandon everyone, so he turned around to confront the powerful enemy at all costs. How could they abandon him? The 3 Stars Divine Clan had been in the wind and frost for tens of thousands of years. They were on the verge of extinction. Only when the Holy King came out and led the tribe out of the world of ice and snow could they finally be rescued from the jaws of death. They were willing to throw away their lives. However, they had to ensure the safety of the Saint King. Only the Saint King was safe. Only the 3 Stars Divine Clan would have hope. Therefore, Guigu and the others were infinitely resolute, determined to defend the 3 Stars Divine Clan's hopes and outsiders with their lives. When the extraterrestrial demons went after them, all of them stood up to stop them. It was very obvious. If they wanted to go after our Holy King, they would have to step over our dead bodies. The extraterrestrial demons were in a hurry to go after Tan Tan and snatch the supreme demonic body. However, the few of them joined forces to fight back. Although their strength couldn't compare to the extraterrestrial demons, they were already fighting back with all their might. Even though the extraterrestrial demons used all their strength, they still couldn't get away. For a moment they roared furiously, Seeing that Tan Tan had actually returned, the extraterrestrial demons were overjoyed instead of shocked. Unexpectedly, this person blocking the way was instead the best strategy to lure the supreme demonic body over. The extremely anxious Tan Tan turned into a streak of light along with his sword, charging over at lightning speed like a meteor descending. An even darker black light flashed across the extraterrestrial demon's eyes. In that instant, the whole world became even dimmer. All of a sudden, his entire body scattered. Yes, it scattered. His entire body abruptly disintegrated and scattered in all directions, leaving behind a huge hole in the middle. It was as if his body had already split into pieces in that instant. Tan Tan became one with his sword. His relentless, sure kill charged through this hole just like that. It was as if his attack had hit empty space. Tan Tan let out a furious roar. Awe-inspiring sword aura suddenly exploded in this hole. Tyrannical power suddenly erupted. The demonic aura in the surroundings immediately surged. The extraterrestrial demons let out a fierce roar. The fatal hand that was grabbing at Guigu's head trembled violently, and was instantly retracted. The momentum of Tan Tan's sword move just now was indomitable and unstoppable. It was impossible for it to stop. Even the extraterrestrial demons would be somewhat strained when faced with this desperate move of his. That was why the extraterrestrial demons chose to perform the Great Disintegration technique. As long as Tan Tan charged past his body, he would be able to get rid of all these eyesores in front of him in a split second. Besides, if Tan Tan's attack completely hit empty space, the backlash from using the wrong amount of force would also be no small matter. There was a high possibility that Tan Tan's strength would be weakened, and it would be more convenient for him to carry out his plans in the future. Therefore, this move could be said to be a brilliant move here. However, despite all the extraterrestrial demons' calculations, they had missed one point. And it was a very important point. Tan Tan was the reincarnation of a demon king from 100,000 years ago. How many secret techniques did he possess? How could he possibly make such a huge mistake of attacking empty space and using the wrong amount of force? Seeing that the extraterrestrial demons had performed the Great Disintegration technique, Tan Tan had already reversed his own origin power in mid-flight. He quickly retracted the sword aura that he had long unleashed and unleashed it at the core of the hole. It attacked the extraterrestrial demon's body indiscriminately from the inside. The extraterrestrial demons could be said to have never imagined this move even in their wildest dreams. Caught off guard, they actually suffered a huge loss. After being violently shaken, the move that they had already unleashed immediately weakened. In reality, this was still because Tan Tan's cultivation was too weak compared to the extraterrestrial demons. If Tan Tan's origin power could reach half of the extraterrestrial demons, this attack would be enough to completely destroy the extraterrestrial demon's body, with Tan Tan's extremely pure theory of devil essence. Guigu and the others roared in unison, taking advantage of this great opportunity to escape from the extraterrestrial demon's attack range that was enveloped by countless demonic hands. Everyone broke out in cold sweat. None of them had expected the extraterrestrial demons to actually be this strong. It was only when they had actually exchanged blows with them that they realized how terrifying the extraterrestrial demons' evil powers were. In just a few exchanges of blows, they were already severely injured, and even in a life-threatening situation. How dare you, Junior? The extraterrestrial demon turned around abruptly and charged toward Tan Tan. His body flitted through the air at high speed, letting out an extremely sharp sound as he sliced through the air. You have already successfully angered the Lord Extraterrestrial Demon. Prepare yourself. Tan Tan snorted coldly and shouted furiously. Why aren't the few of you leaving? Are you waiting for death? This shout was directed at Guigu and the others. Tan Tan desperately hoped that these old fellows would leave as soon as possible. Guigu laughed loudly and pounced forward. If the Saint King doesn't leave, neither will I. If you want to leave, the Saint King should leave first. Tan Tan was so infuriated by Guigu's words that he almost blacked out. He desperately fended off the extraterrestrial demon's all-pervasive attacks as he hissed. Bastard! Guigu! You've lived for so many years, and yet you still have such a bastard temper. Are you guys planning to play yourselves to death, or play me to death? Guigu laughed loudly, already attacking madly behind the extraterrestrial demon. He smiled and said, "Thank you for your praise, Saint King. I will continue to work hard and continue to work hard." Upon hearing such honest words that were akin to an expression of loyalty, Tan only felt waves of bitterness in his mouth. As he watched this elder attack the extraterrestrial demon like a maniac, he heaved a long sigh of helplessness. What was the use of risking his life? It was completely useless. The other party was simply too strong. So strong that it was completely useless even if he risked his life. Bam! Tan only felt as if he had been smashed by a mountain. The extraterrestrial demon's invisible palm landed on his back. There was no trace of this palm at all. The extraterrestrial demon was clearly still on the opposite side. But this palm came from behind him. There wasn't the slightest bit of force that broke through the air. But it was extremely heavy. Even using the analogy of being smashed by a mountain wasn't appropriate enough. Because being smashed by a mountain definitely wouldn't be this serious. The black aura all over Tan's body suddenly exploded and scattered. He staggered, fell to the ground and rolled out. The extraterrestrial demon let out a sinister laugh. He reached out at lightning speed and grabbed at Tan. The supreme demon body was finally going to be his. Tan spat out a mouthful of blood. He tried his best to roll on the ground, barely avoiding the grab. However, the extraterrestrial demon immediately opened his palm and grabbed at him again. The black demonic palm in the air had already expanded to the point where it could cover a radius of several feet. No matter which direction Tan dodged in, he couldn't possibly avoid this claw. It seemed like it was already a foregone conclusion that Tan would fall into the demonic palm. Saint King. Guigu flew over and stood in front of Tan, thrusting his sword toward the demonic palm. The extraterrestrial demon didn't dodge or avoid. As if it didn't see anything, it continued to grab at Tan. Poof! The moment Guigu's sword, which he had poured all his cultivation into, pierced the demonic palm, it shattered into pieces like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. As if struck by lightning, Guigu's face suddenly turned blood red. His entire body leaned backward, about to be sent flying by the pressure. Yes, he was going to be sent flying. The extraterrestrial demon's attention had never been on anyone other than Tan. Therefore, even though it could have easily slapped Guigu to death, it had already given up. Instead, it wanted to send Guigu flying, as long as it didn't interfere with its capture of the supreme demon body. However, Guigu's entire body was almost sent flying by the force. In that instant when he had just started to lean backward, he actually stubbornly held on and forcefully bent his body back again. His two hands struck out fiercely. At the same time, blood began to spurt out from his mouth like a waterfall, mixed with pieces of his internal organs. If he had taken advantage of the momentum and rolled out earlier, his injuries wouldn't have been too serious. However, now that he had forcefully counterattacked, he actually had to endure an impact that was doubled. That was an impact that he couldn't bear. However, he also understood that if he retreated at this moment, the extraterrestrial demon would be able to capture the Saint King. Chapter 1646. Not only could Guigu not retreat, he had to go forward instead. This move was equivalent to him taking on all the attacks with his own body. Guigu couldn't withstand the heavenly demon's attack at all, let alone the fact that he had already suffered considerable injuries previously. The moment they came into contact, he was already severely injured, and his battle prowess plummeted. However, he had already achieved his goal. His only goal in stepping forward was to protect Tan. That was all. The heavenly demon let out a sinister laugh. His huge palm closed around Guigu's hand and squeezed it lightly. However, cracking sounds rang out consecutively. Guigu's arms were completely crushed. He roared furiously and tragically. As though he was going to dig out his heart and liver, he roared, "Divine King, hurry up and leave." His arms were already broken, and he no longer had the strength to attack. Moreover, he was still in the enemy's control. However, he still had his legs and could still retaliate. Even if it was a futile effort, he had to do his best to retaliate. His legs left the ground and hundreds of kicks struck the heavenly demon like a whirlwind. The heavenly demon let out a furious roar. One of his left hands grabbed Guigu's hands while his other right hand struck Guigu's chest fiercely. Almost at the same time, Guigu's hundreds of kicks landed on the heavenly demon's chest like the beating of a drum. Under such a huge force, even the heavenly demon couldn't help but lean backward. It was precisely because of these hundreds of kicks that the right palm that struck Guigu's chest didn't really land a solid blow. However, even though it didn't land a solid blow, this force still had destructive prowess. With a crack, Guigu let out a loud cry. His chest immediately caved in. However, he continued to shout, "Divine King, hurry up and leave." The heavenly demon casually tossed Guigu's body out. He no longer paid any attention to this person, who no longer had the ability to retaliate. If this person didn't die, he would instead pin down the owner of that supreme demonic body and wouldn't leave easily. Then, he strode toward Tan Tan. However, there was a trace of black blood at the corner of his lips. That was the result of Guigu risking his life. The heavenly demon was furious. He didn't expect that with his cultivation, he would actually be injured when facing a few heavenly-level ants. It looked like he had to end the battle quickly. His figure suddenly flashed randomly. The other 5 elders of the divine clan flew up to stop him at the same time. The 5 of them shouted, "Divine King, please leave quickly." Then, just like what Guigu had done earlier, these 5 people charged toward the heavenly demon without any hesitation. The 5 of them stood shoulder to shoulder. Everyone's eyes were wide open in anger as they roared with all their might. He condensed all of his life's cultivation into a single strike and gave it his all. At this moment, there was only one thought in their minds. "Holy King, run. As long as you are alive, even if we are beheaded, our bodies torn apart, and our souls destroyed, it will be worth it." If it weren't for the fact that Tan Tan was too close to everyone's position right now, without any hesitation, these people had already launched a self-detonation attack. But now, he was afraid of breaking the vases. He could only risk his life and fight to the death. The heavenly demon cackled strangely, with an unprecedented killing intent. With a kick, the afterimage of the foot was still in the air. But in reality, it had already landed solidly on the chest of a sacred race elder. With a cracking sound, a large hole was kicked out of the elder's chest. However, the elder hugged the heavenly demon's leg tightly and begged in a hoarse voice, "Holy King, why are you still here? Hurry up and leave." The heavenly demon's right hand shot out rapidly and collided with another elder's palm. With a boom, that elder's palm was smashed into smithereens. With the remaining force, his arm broke all the way up. Then, the heavenly demon had already smashed his own palm into his own chest. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. This elder of the 3 Stars divine clan shouted madly, "Holy King, hurry up and leave." Then, he lowered his head fiercely and bit down hard on the heavenly demon's palm with his white teeth. Without his hands, he couldn't exert any strength with his legs. Thus he used his mouth and teeth. Ah! The heavenly demon let out a cry of pain and quickly retracted his palm. Just like that, he brought out a large piece of flesh and bones from this elder's chest. "Let's fight. Let's die together with him." The other 3 cried out in grief and indignation. Without dodging or avoiding, they charged over directly. They couldn't self-destruct right now. Only by engaging in close combat would they be able to effectively restrain the other party. However, this was also the riskiest and most life-risking method. Yet the elders did it without any hesitation. "Holy King, hurry up and leave." The shouts of the 5 people were still reverberating in the air. In the blink of an eye, the scene had already become so tragic. Tan Tan heard his subordinates shouting madly, "Holy King, hurry up and leave." He saw his old brother's flesh and blood flying everywhere. Tan Tan's entire body started to tremble violently. His eyes slowly turned red. Then they turned pitch black like ink again. He clenched his teeth tightly. His face was ferocious. Suddenly he felt dizzy. He felt as if the sky and earth were spinning. It was as if he had traveled through time and arrived at the land of nightmares. Or rather, he had returned to the past. The past moment that he didn't want to recall the most. The scene from tens of thousands of years ago. The scene that he didn't want to recall the most, suddenly rushed into his mind at this moment. It was the same at that time. Countless clansmen and subordinates had gathered in front of him and rushed towards the scene of the sky collapsing and earth sinking. "Holy King! Hurry up and leave!" Millions of people had shouted together at that time. They had begged him to leave in unison. They had been small and weak in front of him, but it was precisely because they were small and weak that they had braced themselves to meet the world-destroying flood. They had protected him, the most powerful person among the clansmen. They had even begged him to escape. They had begged him to escape. Tan Tan roared silently. The sacrifice in front of him was just like the past, just like that day when flesh and blood flew everywhere. Suddenly, the wildest reason in his blood was stimulated. He opened his mouth and roared soundlessly. His eyes had already become completely black, a color even darker than the night. It was as if they were two black holes. His eyes were still as big as before, but these two invisible black holes seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. They were faintly emitting a suction force. It was a powerful suction force that was full of power. "I've already escaped once. I won't escape this time. I won't escape even if I die." Tan Tan's seriously injured body slowly stood up from the ground. The heavenly demon's main target had been locked on him earlier. That silent palm had almost broken all the bones in his body. Tan Tan shouldn't have been able to move under normal circumstances. In fact, he shouldn't have been able to move even a little bit, let alone stand up and circulate his martial power to fight. However, he seemed to have inexplicably recovered at this moment. In fact, it seemed as if he hadn't been injured at all. "I won't escape again at this moment." Tan Tan's two black hole-like eyes looked at the heavenly demon. He coldly shouted, "Stop." His voice carried an unquestionable domineering command. It was brimming with a domineering aura that said, "Those who obey me will prosper, and those who resist me will perish." It was still Tan Tan's body. It was still Tan Tan's face. But the current Tan Tan seemed to have changed into a completely different person. His former mischievous and scoundrel had already disappeared without a trace. Instead, it was replaced by the imposing aura of a monarch. It was the boldness of a ruler who ruled over the common people. It was the bearing of someone who looked down on the masses. It was the tyrannical aura of someone who had absolute control over life and death. His words carried the might of a law that couldn't be disobeyed. The heavenly demon couldn't help but stop for some reason. Then, he became very dissatisfied with himself for stopping. He angrily shouted, "You, a junior, dare to order me?" Tan Tan's eyes exposed an exceptionally ice-cold killing intention. He insipidly said, "Trash. Has the supreme demon body awakened?" The heavenly demon was startled, but he calmed down after taking a closer look. "So, it's just the return of the sealed power. However, your cultivation will always be limited by the boundary of the heavens, even if it has returned to the past. So, you can't reach the true power that the supreme demon body should possess. So, what can you do to me? You're just a relatively strong ant." Tan Tan looked at him with an indifferent expression in his eyes. He insipidly said, "You're right. This king's power has increased. But it's still not enough to kill you. However, I can still fight with you even if I can't kill you. Let go of my subordinate. This king will fight with you. Don't you want to obtain this king's body? Come and get it." The heavenly demon clearly felt that the opposite party's abundant fighting strength was as if he had been reborn. In fact, it wasn't inferior to his current fighting strength, so he couldn't help but become cautious. After all, he needed to be alive to enjoy the temptation, so it was better to be careful. The heavenly demon gently let go of his hand. Then he slowly floated in the air. He laughed and said, "Haha, you're a demon among demons. But you're still too weak right now. So, why don't you simply let go of your divine soul and let me use your demon body to display its potential power? Then we can reach the peak together. How about it? I can guarantee that I won't destroy your soul, so we can rule the world together." The heavenly demon's promise came from the bottom of his heart. Tan Tan's current state had been greatly enhanced. However, he was still inferior to the heavenly demon, so it was difficult for him to win. The heavenly demon had made a compromise. He was willing to use his two souls to control his body, so he could quickly develop the potential power of the supreme demon body. In a sense, this was a win-win situation. Tan crossed his hands behind his back and rebuked. Bullshit. You're just a little demon. You want to control my demon body? You're mistaken. Suddenly he wrinkled his brows. Then he silently laughed. I used to respect my identity, so I never used to curse. But I didn't expect that this time. He. I've changed a lot. Let's fight. Tan's clothes fluttered without wind. His long hair fluttered in the air. He stood in the pool of blood. Black fog slowly curled up behind him. It was complete darkness. He took a step forward. The black fog behind him became even thicker. The demonic aura that the heavenly demon had released earlier and enveloped a lot of space seemed to have been assimilated by Tan's black fog in this instant. Wisps of demonic aura started to gather around Tan. That kind of domineering aura, that kind of authority, almost filled the entire world. Upon sensing this lawless and awe-inspiring aura, the listless eyes of Gooey Goo and the others, who were clearly already on the brink of death, abruptly widened. An indescribable agitation filled their hearts. Hot tears brimmed in their eyes as they sobbed. Divine King, you finally awakened. Ignoring the heavy injuries on their bodies, these old men were actually crying out loud in excitement. Chapter 1647. The Awakening of a Divine King. The 3 Stars Divine Clan had been waiting for this day, for a whole 100,000 years. 100,000 years was too long, far too long. The Supreme Demon body is indeed impressive. To actually be able to devour my overflowing demonic aura. The heavenly demon's eyes revealed boundless admiration. Looking at Tan, whose entire body was shrouded in black fog, it said fiercely, "It's a pity that your current cultivation is ultimately still a little too weak, so you can't devour it on a large scale. Otherwise, I really wouldn't be able to do anything to you, and might even die in your hands. However, victory and defeat can already be determined now. Your supreme demon body is mine." Tan didn't say a word. His body didn't move at all, but he suddenly rose into the air. With one hand behind his back and the other hand waving in the air, a pitch-black saber that was several hundred feet long suddenly appeared and slashed down rapidly. Good move. This move is a little more decent. The heavenly demon let out a long laugh. Without dodging or evading, it rose to meet the attack head-on. A strangely shaped huge black sword appeared in its hand and met Tan's huge saber horizontally. However, the heavenly demon could already sense from the momentum of this saber that Tan's attack this time was definitely a world of difference from before. The force hidden in this saber strike was contained and not revealed. Even if it landed on the ground, as long as Tan didn't want to destroy this land, not even a grain of sand would fly up. However, if Tan deliberately wanted to exert force, then this saber strike would be enough to split the entire place into 2. The saber and sword met brazenly in the air. Demonic aura and black fog rose at the same time. They spread out in all directions. Tan drew his saber and spun it. Like a violent storm, 700 saber strikes came down. The heavenly demon's sword flew, not retreating an inch. It received every saber strike without missing anything. Be it technique or precision, both had reached an astonishing level. The battle earlier, they had fought until spatial cracks were everywhere. Its might could be said to be world-shaking. However, the battle between the two of them at this moment was like the most ordinary duels of the pugilistic world in the lower 3 heavens. At first glance, one saber and one sword looked extremely ordinary. No matter how he flipped and moved, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Even the flowers and plants on the ground didn't notice their battle at all. However, the listless Gooey Goo and the others on the ground all revealed extremely shocked expressions in their eyes. That was the realm of returning to one's original state. This was already the realm of legends. Although the weapons of these 2 people did not seem to have any power attached to them, everyone knew that these 2 people were using the most precise method to flexibly use their own elemental energy. That was an almost perfect control. Not a single bit would be wasted. All the power would only explode when attacking the opponent. As long as the power did not come into contact with the opponent's body and did not cause any harm to the opponent, then the power would be completely suppressed from leaking out. Not a single detail was missed. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already exchanged thousands of blows. In the realm of returning to one's true self, every move was divine, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Every move was exquisite, exquisite to the extreme. The heavenly demon's devil chi was still being emitted. Tantan's black fog was also unceasingly engulfing and expanding. A lot of the surrounding devil energy had already been assimilated by the black fog and had become Tantan's power. However, the battle between the two of them was completely different from the battle in the fog. Or rather, the result was the exact opposite, with the heavenly demon activating his cultivation at all costs and regardless of the cost. Even though Tantan's moves were exceptionally exquisite, his cultivation was ultimately inferior by quite a bit. He was already starting to slowly fall into a disadvantageous position. Guigu and the others watched on with widened eyes. However, they were already too severely injured and on the verge of death. They couldn't even move at all, and could only feel anxious. Actually, even if everyone was as healthy as usual, the battle before them wasn't something they could intervene in. The difference in their levels was too great. The heavenly demon was actually already secretly complaining about it right now. Ignoring his injuries, he forcibly activated his full strength with the intention of ending the battle as quickly as possible. Although he looked impressive now, he actually knew in his heart that he might not be able to hold on for too long. He might not be able to hold on for much longer. Even in the most ideal situation, he would only be able to hold on for another 15 minutes. If he still couldn't take down Tantan, then he would have no choice but to retreat. Moreover, after retreating this time, his injuries would definitely relapse again and become even more serious than before. It would definitely endanger his life, spirit, and origin energy. Therefore, he had hardened his heart, and his attacks had become heavier and heavier. I must capture Tantan before I reach my limit. Then, I must extract his soul. Then, I must enter the devil body and dominate this supreme body. Only then can I preserve my divine soul and primordial power. On Tantan's side, he was even more anxious. Guigu and the others were severely injured, and their lives were in danger at every turn. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were on the verge of death. If he couldn't defeat the heavenly demon as quickly as possible, these few people would really be finished. However, how could it be easy to defeat him as quickly as possible? He was already gradually falling into a disadvantageous position, and was almost unable to retaliate, let alone defeat him. As for defeating him as quickly as possible, it was practically a fool's dream. After he suddenly activated his old soul earlier, his strength had undoubtedly increased tremendously. If he were to escape with just his original body, Tantan could be said to have 10,000% confidence. However, if he were to leave, what would happen to Guigu and the others? There would only be a Tantan who would die in battle. There would definitely be no Saint Kings who would escape. Therefore, Tantan could only fight with his life on the line and hope to create an impossible miracle. Right now, Tantan was fighting with his life on the line. The same went for the heavenly demon. It was just that Tantan wasn't aware of the heavenly demon's difficulties. Sensing that the other party's attacks were becoming more and more concentrated, and their might was becoming heavier and heavier, Tantan's heart also finally sank bit by bit. Could it be that I'm going to fall here in the end? Death isn't scary, but what about those subordinates and brothers who used their lives to protect me? Right at this moment, a deafening roar suddenly came from afar. From the direction of the capital, a majestic sword light that resembled a shooting star was hurtling toward them at extreme speed, bringing with it rolling wind and thunder. Before the person arrived, the majestic sword aura that filled the entire world already revealed the identity of the person who had come. The Tribulation Sword Master. In this heavenly layer world, there was absolutely no other sword expert who could reach such a level of power. In this world, there was only the Tribulation Sword Master. Only the Tribulation Sword Master. Only the Tribulation Sword. Tantan became even more anxious. No matter how much Chu Yang's cultivation had improved, even though the Tribulation Sword was unparalleled in the world, its might was only at the level of Guigu and the others at best. Although it was already at the peak below the heavenly demon, it still wasn't qualified enough to intervene in the battle between him and the heavenly demon. If Chu Yang forcefully intervened, he would probably really disappear from this world completely after this battle. However, judging from the momentum of Chu Yang's arrival, he was already on his way. There was no way he would stop halfway. Tan Tan's heart heated up. He shouted, "Chu Yang, don't come over. Hurry up and leave." His heart was filled with endless regret, as if he was being fried in oil. This fool, he actually really came to court death. What a bastard! What a bastard! Chu Yang flew over on his sword and immediately saw the demonic aura and black fog rolling in front of him. Two figures seemed to be soaring through the clouds and fog as they fought fiercely. Chu Yang was naturally very familiar with Tan Tan's figure. He recognized him at a glance. Between these two people, the one who had already fallen into a disadvantageous position and was in imminent danger was his own junior martial brother. At this moment, the anger in Chu Yang's heart soared endlessly. Without even thinking, he increased his strength and flew over on his sword before he even landed on the ground. Chu Yang turned a deaf ear to Tan Tan's voice. He just used all his strength to activate his sword. "Don't come over? Damn it, then what am I doing here? Watching you die." Looking at his junior martial brother's indescribably miserable appearance, Chu Yang only felt his head explode. In an instant, he lost all rationality. "How dare you hurt my brother? Kill!" Under such a violent rage, the heaven-piercing divine technique was activated without regard for the consequences. For the first time, it started to circulate rapidly in Chu Yang's meridians. Chu Yang roared and shouted, "Slaughter the world!" So what? An extremely blazing white light erupted from the Calamity Sword. Its brightness definitely surpassed the brightness of the sun in the sky. It completely condensed into the size of the tip of the sword. With an unbridled aura, it charged madly toward the extraterrestrial demon. So what if he slaughtered the world? For the first time, Chu Yang condensed all the force of this domineering move into a single point. Chu Yang was confident that even if the Dharma Supreme and Wu Jueqing were to join forces, this sword of his would definitely be able to severely injure either of them. This was no longer just a simple estimation. It was Chu Yang's absolute confidence. The extraterrestrial demon was obviously so strong that it was difficult to estimate. Even Gui Gu and many other lower-level supreme martial artists were already lying on the ground. Only Tan Tan was barely able to contend with it. Then, Tan Tan must have once again awakened the spirit of his previous life. Otherwise, there was no way he could have done this. After all, Tan Tan's previous strength wasn't that much stronger than Gui Gu and the others. However, Chu Yang was well aware of how powerful Tan Tan's divine soul had been in his previous life. For an extraterrestrial demon to be able to completely suppress Tan Tan under such circumstances, even Chu Yang himself, who had improved, was still no match for it. Even if he joined forces with Tan Tan, it might not necessarily work. Therefore, if he wanted to resolve Tan Tan's crisis, this might be the only chance he had. All these flashed through Chu Yang's mind. He thought through everything. Therefore, Chu Yang activated all of his cultivation and emptied all of the energy in his dantian. He condensed all of his power into this sword. A sword of pure slaughter. Chu Yang didn't even dare to use other calamity sword techniques to complement it, for fear that it would reduce the pure destructive power of this sword. This sword was almost as powerful as Chu Yang's self-destruction, and it was the kind that didn't take into account the addition of the calamity sword. However, after the sword attack was launched, and its power was unleashed to the maximum, Chu Yang himself would be in an awkward situation where he couldn't move at all. He wouldn't even be able to move a finger, truly at the mercy of the extraterrestrial demon. Therefore, this sword must succeed. Chapter 1648. When the heavenly demon and Tan Tan discovered Chu Yang's presence, Minister Chu charged in with the momentum of a thunderbolt. What harm was there in slaughtering the entire world? This sword was infused with boundless rage. It was a sword that had been pushed to the limit. It completely disregarded the consequences and charged straight into the battlefield where the two great experts were going to fight. Other than the sword move, he didn't even say a single unnecessary word. After a long and arduous journey, before he even landed on the ground, he launched a powerful strike, the only strike, striking with full force. This strike was even extremely casual, because both the heavenly demon and Tan Tan thought that Chu Yang should at least land on the ground and take a breather. But they didn't expect that this person actually didn't even say a word or make a sound before he started right away. Moreover, it was a strike that risked his life to the very end, a strike that would either succeed or die trying. Right at this moment, because Tan Tan suddenly saw Chu Yang, he was distracted, and the heavenly demon's 3 punches and 2 kicks landed on him at the same time. Tan Tan let out a loud cry and flew backward. He turned his head desperately to look at Chu Yang, his expression anxious. Baidu search to see the latest chapter. He shouldn't have come. With a flash of his sword, Chu Yang didn't even bat an eyelid or care about the retreating Tan Tan. Just like that, he brazenly brushed past Tan Tan's side and charged over with the momentum of a thunderbolt. The 2 figures of the Marshall brothers crossed each other and separated. A sinister sneer flashed across the heavenly demon's eyes. A wave of past and old hatred welled up in his heart. When he experimented with his spirit the last time, a considerable portion of his energy had been accidentally devoured by this little guy. Otherwise, he would have recovered 20% of his cultivation by now, or even more. If he had recovered 20% of his cultivation, wouldn't it be as easy as flipping his hand to deal with this supreme demonic body now? Why would he have to be in such a dilemma and put in such a difficult position? At this moment, this little guy actually delivered himself to his doorstep. This was what it meant to barge into hell, when there was a path to heaven. Although this fellow's spirit was abnormally strong, the cultivation he displayed was at best only on par with that Guigu. In fact, it was even slightly inferior. Although this sword seemed to have a great momentum, and the sword move was swift and fierce, but even that fatty Guigu was easily dealt with. How could he be an exception this time? You're courting death. The corners of the heavenly demon's mouth curled up in a sinister smile. His 2 hands, one in front and one behind, met Chu Yang's sword tip without any intention of dodging. He had to shatter his sword in one strike and kill this brat. He had to destroy his spirit and consign him to eternal damnation. He took a deep breath. ZJ's hand, even the famous divine sword of the layered heavens, could not harm him in the slightest, let alone an ant-like warrior of the layered heavens. In the blink of an eye, Chu Yang and his sword crashed into the heavenly demon's palm. Be careful, Tan Tan shouted. The sinister smile on the heavenly demon's face instantly froze. The next moment, the heavenly demon screamed in agony. ZJ's well-tempered palms were only able to block the opponent's sword for a short while. But in the next moment, it was like a piece of tofu meeting a sharp knife. With a chi sound, it was rushed over. This heavenly demon was still cruelly thinking about how to ravage the other party, and had yet to react. Chu Yang let out a loud shout. So what if he slaughtered the entire world? All the condensed sword aura in this move suddenly erupted to the maximum, the moment the sword tip rushed into the opponent's palm. Thousands of sword aura rushed into the heavenly demon's body almost at the same time. It invaded all the meridians in the heavenly demon's body. Motherfucker. How is this possible? This is a Shmi sword. This is a Shmi sword after all. The heavenly demon screamed wildly. He really did not expect this brat's sword to be so sharp. The heavenly demon aura in his body surged fiercely. He intended to block the other party's sword aura. But Chu Yang's momentum was unrelenting. The sword tip continued to press forward in the heavenly demon's palm. It pierced into the palm. It pierced into the forearm. It pierced into the arm. It pierced into the shoulder. The heavenly demon's bones shattered like a hot knife through butter under the tribulation sword. Chu Yang let out a fierce roar. The layered heaven's sword aura exploded. The heavenly demon aura came from all directions, intending to block. However, Chu Yang rushed into the extraterrestrial demon's body with his sword. Boom! The heavenly demon's entire left shoulder was smashed into pieces by Chu Yang. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, turning into black rain. Yes, his flesh and blood were all black. The heavenly demon screamed miserably. Half of his body completely turned into nothingness. Chu Yang had actually rushed out from his body, and took away a large amount of dense heavenly demon fog. Puff, puff, puff. Streams of sword aura rushed out from the heavenly demon's body and shot out. At this moment, the heavenly demon's body was like a leaky sieve. It was desperately trying to squeeze out those nearly solid cyan sword aura. This time, it was not the body formed by the heavenly demon aura that was destroyed. Instead, it was the real body of the heavenly demon that was destroyed. The heavenly demon's injuries were so serious that it was shocking to see. Such a clean and neat result was not only beyond the heavenly demon's expectations, but also beyond Tantan's expectations. This result was seriously too inconceivable, wasn't it? The two of them had been fighting for their lives here for so long, and still could not do anything to the other party. Yet, this little one had attacked without any warning, and instantly broke the stalemate, even severely injuring the heavenly demon. What kind of situation was this? In terms of cultivation alone, it seemed like even 10 Chu Yangs added together would not be a match for the current heavenly demon. But the heavenly demon was seriously too careless. He actually grabbed Chu Yang's sword with his bare hands. He wanted to kill Chu Yang with a single strike like how he dealt with Guigu. But the heavenly demon didn't think so. Chu Yang's sword was no ordinary sword. It was the legendary Calamity Sword. Even in the heavenly imperial court, it was definitely the #1 peerless divine sword. In fact, it was not just in the heavenly imperial court. Even if one surveyed the world and the universe, it was very difficult to find a divine sword that was stronger than this Calamity Sword. Because the creator of this sword was a super mighty person who was almost above everything in the world. But then again, if it was just the Calamity Sword alone, even if the heavenly demon was careless, he definitely wouldn't be severely injured. Once the sword aura entered his body, it would be expelled by the demonic aura. At most, he would only suffer some superficial injuries and might not affect the overall situation. But other than the Calamity Sword, Chu Yang also had the Heaven Overarching Divine Technique. He unleashed the Heaven Overarching Divine Technique's cultivation to the maximum in one go. All of it turned into sword aura. Even if the heavenly demon was at his peak, he wouldn't be able to withstand having his meridians explode like this, much less now when his cultivation was less than 1/10 of it. Not to mention that the heavenly demon didn't know that Chu Yang was the Calamity Sword Master at all. Even if he was, he would still have to take this loss. Because he didn't know what the words Calamity Sword Master represented at all. Tantan couldn't help but rub his eyes. He murmured, "I'm not dreaming. I must be dreaming. Otherwise, how could there be such a powerful sword? How could there be such a terrifying sword?" "Ah!" the heavenly demon screamed miserably. He couldn't believe the extreme pain in his body. His eyes were wide open in shock. Finally, his right hand grabbed at Chu Yang fiercely. He screamed, "Little, how dare you? You won't have a good death." His hand grabbed at Chu Yang fiercely. Chu Yang had unleashed all the strength in his body, so it was difficult for him to even move a finger. He could only fly forward due to the inertia. He could only look on helplessly as the heavenly demon palm came towards him at lightning speed. However, he was powerless to do anything. Tantan shouted, "Be careful." He rushed forward fiercely, but it was obviously too late. "Chu Yang." Tantan's eyes opened wide, and he madly shouted. He felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. If it wasn't for ZJ, would Chu Yang have to do this? It was ZJ's cry for help that Chu Yang came from thousands of miles away. He didn't even take a breath, and went straight into the battle. He went all out the moment he attacked. Now he was in a situation where his life was at stake. However, ZJ wanted to save him, but he couldn't. The brother who had come to save ZJ had succeeded in saving ZJ, but ZJ had died. At this moment, Tantan almost wanted to end ZJ's life with ZJ. The regret and guilt in his heart had almost drowned his mind. Just at this critical moment, inside Chu Yang's body, there was a cold snort, and a figure suddenly rushed out of Chu Yang's body. Two withered hands firmly grabbed the heavenly demon's right hand. The figure gradually solidified. It was a withered figure with a vague face. His eyes were like that of an old farmer who had gone through the vicissitudes of life. They were full of turbidity. However, That pair of eyes stared at the heavenly demon and shouted, "Heavenly demon! Don't be so savage. And me." It was the sword spirit. The sword spirit's voice was still echoing. He opened his mouth and spat out an unusually blazing flame with a puff sound. The heavenly demon screamed as if it had seen a ghost. "Ah, Nirvana flame. Damn it. Damn it. Ah, damn it." That flame rushed over. The heavenly demon's right hand, which was restrained by the sword spirit, immediately caught on fire and started to burn. However, that hand also fiercely clashed with the sword spirit's hand. Boundless demonic energy and endless destructive power also erupted at the same time. The sword spirit's cultivation grew along with the tribulation sword master's cultivation. Although it wasn't weak at the moment, it was limited by the tribulation sword master's cultivation. Therefore, the sword spirit's current strength was only one level above the peak of the middle grade level. Facing the heavenly demon's all-out attack, the sword spirit couldn't bear it at the moment. The sword spirit's body trembled violently. Then he coughed. His body, which was gradually solidifying, faded away and disappeared completely. However, the heavenly demon screamed in agony. The cultivation that he had forcibly stimulated previously was finally unable to continue at this point. But he had also suffered fatal injuries. His left hand had been destroyed by Chu Yang, and his right hand had also been burned by this guy who had inexplicably rushed out of Chu Yang's body. Furthermore, that fella's strange phoenix True Chi had once again made things worse on top of Zheng's heavy injuries, causing his injuries to become even more severe. That damn Nirvana flame was still in Chu Yang's hand, and it was still burning gracefully. The flame flickered again and again, and again and again. The new and old injuries were acting up at the same time. The heavenly demon really wanted to die at this moment. More importantly, he was really about to die. Chapter 1649. Chu Yang rushed out like a whirlwind. The energy in his body had finally dissipated. He didn't even have the strength to look back. His whole body fell to the ground with a plop. He didn't move at all. It wasn't that Chu Yang didn't want to move, but he really didn't have any strength left. He really couldn't move at all. Tan Tam finally rushed over and stood in front of Chu Yang, but he was still spitting out blood from his mouth. If the heavenly demon still wanted to go forward, Tan Tan definitely wouldn't mind risking his life to drag the heavenly demon down with him. The heavenly demon's injury was very serious. It was a complete blow. Even if it was a peak-grade supreme martial artist, it would be impossible for him to survive such a serious injury. Half of his body was completely shattered, and the remaining half was almost turned into a sieve by Chu Yang's sword energy. One hand was completely gone, and the other hand was still suffering from the merciless burning of the Nirvana flame. The heavenly demon's injuries could hardly be described as severe. With such injuries, even if there were 10,000 people, there would still be 1,000 deaths. But the heavenly demon was still the heavenly demon. He was that what if? Perhaps it was because he wasn't a human but a demon. Baidu search to see the latest chapter. First, he defeated the 7 supreme martial artists. Then, he fought a decisive battle with the 3-star Holy King and gained the upper hand. Then, he exchanged blows with the Tribulation Sword Master. Although he suffered a great loss due to his ignorance, he still made the Tribulation Sword Master unable to move. He even almost destroyed the Sword Spirit with one move. Such a cultivation was definitely unparalleled in the heavenly layer. If it was someone else with such an injury, they would have died many times over. But the heavenly demon was still alive and kicking. Yes, but more than half of his alive and kicking was due to pain. It was really too painful. And it was a continuous pain. The Nirvana flame burned fiercely in his hand. The heavenly demon's pain was simply piercing straight into his marrow. He roared. He used his demonic energy, exhausted his cultivation, and spared no expense. But he still couldn't extinguish the life flame of the Phoenix clan. The heavenly demon wanted to cry, but had no tears. But a demon was still a demon. He barely endured the pain. He used his demonic energy to form a knife. With a swoosh, he actually cut off ZJ's right hand from his forearm. It fell to the ground neatly. He even jumped twice. A viper bites the hand, and a warrior cuts the wrist. It was the same principle. But the heavenly demon's fate was even more helpless and tragic than the warrior who lost his wrist, because he was already holding a knife in his hand when he was cutting off his wrist. The nirvana flame was still burning slowly. From the looks of it, he wouldn't stop until the arm was completely burned. The heavenly demon roared and screamed, its voice almost hoarse. Even though he had the body of a heavenly demon, such an injury was too serious. Now both of his arms were gone, one of his shoulders was gone, and half of his body was shattered. The remaining half of its body was also riddled with holes. The heavenly demon's current injuries were much more serious than when it was captured and had its cultivation destroyed. The worst thing was that the power that ZJ had forcefully mobilized had been completely exhausted and could not be used again. Currently, he was basically at the end of his rope. At this moment, the heavenly demon's only thought was to escape. Only by surviving would there be a future. He tried his best to activate the remaining bits of devil chi. It covered half of his body. He tried his best to recover ZJ's injuries, even though the effect was minimal. But it was better than nothing. He glared at Tan Tan hatefully. Under the intense pain, the heavenly demon howled like a wolf. "Little one, I will take over your devil body sooner or later. Ah, it hurts so much. Damn it, damn it." His voice was still echoing as he turned around and left. His speed was extremely fast. With one fluttering and two fluttering, he was already hundreds of feet away. He had to go back as soon as possible and find the Dharma Supreme to replenish his spirit. If he didn't replenish his nutrients, ZJ would really die here. He had really gone for wool and come home shorn today. At this moment, Tan Tan was also at the end of his rope. He no longer had the strength to pursue an attack. He could only watch as the heavily injured heavenly demon left. The strong enemy was finally gone. His legs went soft and he fell to the ground. Coincidentally, he sat on Chu Yang. Minister Chu, who was limp all over and couldn't exert any strength, instantly cried out in pain from being sat on. He was like a pig being slaughtered. He was actually sitting on his ribs. He hissed and sucked in cold air. "If you don't stand up, I will punish you on behalf of my teacher." Hiss. Tan Tan moved his butt comfortably, causing Chu Yang to scream again. He then said lazily, You have to wait until I go back. When your junior brother comes out, you can tell him. It's useless to tell me. I'm not your junior brother. I'm also provoking you so that you can stand up sooner. My subordinates still need your heavy pills to save them. Why aren't you standing up yet? Is it very comfortable for me to sit on you? If it's comfortable, then it's okay to stay a little longer." Fuck. Chu Yang sucked in a breath of cold air. "SSS, if it was you, I wouldn't have come over. You deserve to be beaten to death." Tan Tan snorted. He raised his head and said, "That's because you're meddling in other people's business. Who cares?" The two people who were stubborn with their words and refused to let Chu Yang off began to laugh. Actually, both of them were well aware of the situation. Chu Yang definitely didn't make a move because of a misunderstanding. He saw it more clearly than anyone else. However, he still chose to make a move. Furthermore, he made a move that left no room for leeway. Tan Tan, or rather 3-star Saint King, was the same. He definitely wouldn't allow anyone to hurt Chu Yang, even at the cost of his life and soul. However, both of them wouldn't say it out loud. It was fine as long as they knew it in their hearts. If they said it out loud, the taste of gratitude would be too obvious. It would be too boring. That would make both of them feel uncomfortable. After a short while, Chu Yang flipped Tan Tan off from Chu Yang's body. Chu Yang was only momentarily exhausted and didn't actually suffer any injuries. After a short while he recovered. Although his cultivation hadn't fully recovered, it wasn't a problem for him to move freely. This time he flipped over and kicked out. A certain Saint King was instantly kicked 7 or 8 times. Ignoring the certain Saint King's angry glare, he started to search Chu Yang's body. He first took out an incomplete version of the heavy pill and swallowed it. "I don't have any pills. Guigu's injuries are the most serious." "You!" Tan Tan shouted. "Shut up," Chu Yang said fiercely and angrily. "I have eyes. I can see. I don't need you to run your mouth. Believe it or not, I'll slap you. Do you think you're so great just because you're a Saint King? Tan Tan grinned and glared fiercely at Chu Yang. He scolded. When I can move again, I'll let you have a taste of my power. However, a hint of a smile secretly flashed across the depths of his eyes. Tan Tan, this senior brother of the Tribulation Sword Master, seemed to be really not bad. This time, Chu Yang had really bled a lot. The lives of Guigu and the others were hanging by a thread. If they had used the heavy pills, they really wouldn't have been able to be saved. The other four were still fine. They could recover a little with the incomplete version of the heavy pills. At the very least, their lives wouldn't be in danger. However, Guigu and that elder who had fought the most fiercely had almost all their internal organs smashed. If they didn't use the complete version of the heavy pills, they would really die. Chu Yang sighed painfully as he took out several heavy pills. He also cursed Tan Tan under his breath. Bastard, why do you always have to be like this? When that little Tan Tan comes back, you'll have to manipulate him properly. It won't be over if you don't show him 100 different tricks. Tan Tan sat at the side. At the start, he was just smiling in relief. Then, he swayed violently and fell down with a thud. He lost all consciousness. The Saint King's soul still hadn't fully awakened. Forcefully awakening it had ultimately resulted in a backlash. This time, he had gone through such a fierce battle. Now that the backlash had come, the damage was even greater. Now that the enemy was gone, the problem was solved, and his subordinates were saved, his wish was fulfilled. His mind relaxed, and he immediately fell into a coma. Chu Yang snorted and went over to take a look. When he realized that he was in danger, he kicked him to one side. When he woke up this time, it should be Tan Tan again, right? This bastard, I'm really scared to death this time. What the hell are you doing? Although Guigu and the others were recuperating, when they saw Chu Yang kick the Saint King, they still couldn't help but glare at him furiously. This bastard, even if he's the Saint King's senior brother, he's still a little too rude. How can he kick the Saint King? Chu Yang was depressed. I've just saved your lives. I'm your collective savior. How dare you glare at me? This bunch of ingrates. On the other side, the heavenly demon roared as he fled. The speed at which he fled was extremely fast. Along the way, no less than hundreds of people fell to the ground, and their souls were all devoured by him. But to the heavenly demon, this little bit of spiritual energy was like a drop in the bucket. It was like a drop in the ocean. It was of no use at all. The heavenly demon was both depressed and scared. ZJ's spirit was dissipating continuously, and his cultivation also seemed to be gradually collapsing. Moreover, he was still a distance away from the Dharma Supreme. Could ZJ hold on? If he were to replenish the spirit energy of an expert right now, the consequences would be unimaginable. At this thought, he couldn't help but feel helpless. In front of him, there was another handsome junior scholar, and a young lady slowly approaching. The heavenly demon followed the principle of, if it's possible to have sex. So he didn't even bother to check on the other party, and immediately attacked without hesitation. He bit down at once. No matter how small this grasshopper was, it was still meat. He thought that it would be a piece of cake. Unexpectedly, the junior scholar raised his head abruptly, smiled strangely and said, "Huh? It's actually the heavenly demon?" The heavenly demon was stunned. As the other party spoke, he waved his hand and a colorless and odorless mist suddenly spread out. Then with a swoosh, the sword was swift and ruthless. "Invisible poison?" The heavenly demon shouted. This time, he was really going to cry. How could a random person he met use such a move like invisible poison? If it was in the past, the heavenly demon wouldn't care about this at all. It wouldn't even touch him. But now there was nothing he could do. He was actually attacked head-on. Especially when he was biting someone with his mouth open, and this invisible poison was sucked into his mouth. This could be said to be extremely tragic. Chapter 1650. At this moment, the heavenly demon's heart was filled with all sorts of emotions. Sour, sweet, bitter, spicy, salty, all came one after another. What a loss! If his hands hadn't been chopped off. If he hadn't, the heavenly demon truly wanted to cry, but no tears came out. The young man didn't hesitate and attacked again. Sword light flashed as if he was facing a great enemy. Another peak-grade supreme martial artist. The heavenly demon let out a blood-curdling shriek as he was stabbed twice more. His soul almost left his body as he howled and fled. Full character hand strike. This old man was not only an expert in using poison. Furthermore, he was a peak low-grade supreme martial artist. Damn! Why are there so many legendary experts in the Chongtian continent? The heavenly demon, who was at the end of his rope, did not dare to continue fighting. He immediately changed directions and chose to break out from the direction of the little girl. Let's run first. We'll talk about it when we get back. This time, the heavenly demon didn't even dare to think about attacking this little girl. Baidu search see the latest chapter. Besides, isn't this young lady already a peak low-grade supreme being? As long as they could leave this place as soon as possible, it would be thanks to the blessings of the Devil Sect. This place was simply too dangerous. This Chongtian continent was really too strange. Once you meet someone, you can't afford to offend them. Normally, you wouldn't even see these people. However, once Zhang Tian was injured, they would appear one after another. What kind of world was this? Just as the heavenly demon's body was about to move, the beautiful little girl Arun raised her head and gave him a pure smile. What a beautiful smile! Although the heavenly demon was a ferocious and evil person, he was almost mesmerized by this smile at this moment. Too pure, too flawless, too cute. Then, the little girl waved at ZJ with her fair hand. It was as if two white orchids had bloomed in front of ZJ. The sky demon was stunned for a moment and felt an indescribable pain in its body. It screamed like a pig being slaughtered. Oh God! What the hell? Innate poison. In the end, he couldn't even speak properly. He kept muttering tap tap tap, like the rhythm of a healthy horse trotting on flat ground. If there was someone who was proficient in music by the side, they would almost think that this guy was playing a horse-riding dance. Formless poison was one thing, but innate poison was a terrifying thing that even heavenly demons could not withstand. That senior scholar's first move was to use an invisible poison. It was already abnormal enough. Who would have thought that such an innocent and pure little girl would be even more terrifying? Even more terrifying. It was even more vicious. He didn't even greet him. Innate poison was used as soon as he attacked. He was truly unlucky. This time, the heavenly demon really cried. Over there, he had lost both of his hands due to a series of battles. Here, he had been poisoned by an invisible poison. Then he was poisoned by an innate poison. Who did I offend? The heavenly demon once again turned into black smoke and rolled away. With his life nearing its end, the heavenly demon's only thought now was to escape. Wu Jueqing and Chuluor chased after him. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but that the heavenly demon was really too fast. They wouldn't be able to catch up even if they tired themselves to death. At this moment, the heavenly demon's speed of escape was simply appalling and unimaginable. In the blink of an eye, it had completely disappeared. It was such a godly speed. He was indeed a demon who brought calamity to the world. Seeing the heavenly demon fleeing for his life, Chuluor frowned in confusion. Teacher, this is the legendary heavenly demon? That demon who brought calamity to the world? Wu Jueqing was thinking about something. He said casually, Yes, this is the legendary heavenly demon. Chuluor tilted her head. But this is the power of the so-called demon who brought calamity to the world? It's too weak. Nothing has happened yet, and he's already running away crying. If he didn't run away, I would have been able to take care of him. I think he's just running at an exaggerated speed. He doesn't have anything more impressive. What a waste of such a big name. Wu Jueqing was stunned. What was that? An heavenly demon. Such a terrifying existence was actually described as too weak by the great teacher's disciple. It's such a waste of the big boss's reputation. This was really a little ironic. Little girl, you don't know any better. Don't talk nonsense. Wu Jueqing thought for a while and recalled the fleeting battle just now. He said slowly, Lass, you're still too inexperienced. How can the heavenly demon be as weak as you described? Of course, I believe you when you say that you can take care of him in his current state. Because this heavenly demon must have suffered fatal injuries, or even life-threatening injuries. That's why he's so weak. Also, Did you notice that the heavenly demon's hands are also injured? That's why when he attacked me, he could only use his mouth to bite me. Although it was only a short battle just now, according to my judgment, this heavenly demon's true strength is definitely above the peak of supreme martial artist level, even exceeding the limits of the heaven and earth. If his injuries weren't so severe, the two of us, master and disciple, would most likely have met with misfortune today. Chu Luo naturally did not doubt Master Zijie's judgment. She wrinkled her delicate nose and said, "But this fellow is really a weirdo. He obviously lost both his hands because of his sex, yet he still dares to provoke us. The most interesting thing is that he actually opened his mouth to deal with Master's invisible poison. This is really too fun." Hearing how interesting his disciple's words were, Wu Jueqing couldn't help but laugh. After laughing, he still couldn't help but feel some lingering fear. Even though Wu Jueqing sounded very serious when he spoke to Chu Luo, he was, in fact, trying his best to downplay the heavenly demon's strength. Wu Jueqing had tens of thousands of years of experience. How could he not see the limits of the heavenly demon? Such a demon was really frightening and frightening. It was just that if he said these words to his disciple now, it would be a blow to her confidence. So he still held back. It was just that after thinking for a long time, he still couldn't figure out how such a terrifying fellow could end up in such a state. Wasn't he a little too pitiful? Who was it that was so awesome that they could actually beat the insufferably arrogant heavenly demon to such an extent? He was practically crippled, and smashed into pieces. This was really too admirable. How could there be such a godly person in this heavenly realm? Let's take a few more steps forward. Perhaps the heavenly demon was injured in front. If there's a chance, it's more important to meet those mighty experts who defeated the heavenly demon. Wu Jueqing's eyes were filled with intense interest. The reason why he used those was because the heavenly demon was really too powerful. It was definitely not something a single person could deal with, let alone cripple it to such a state. Okay. Chu Luo nodded hurriedly. The little girl was naturally very interested in the demon slayer hero. The master and disciple quickened their pace. Like two gusts of wind, they quickly disappeared from the main road. The battlefield was a complete mess. At the beginning, the chaos created by Tan Tan and the others covered an area of 10,000 feet. It was like a huge pit. Although Chu Yang and the others had all taken elixirs, they could only barely move. The injuries they had suffered this time were too severe. Everyone sat cross-legged on the ground, meditating to recover their strength and recuperate. Of the 7 people from the 3 Stars Divine Clan, one of them was covered in injuries. There was also Tan Tan who was unconscious. In the battle against the heavenly demon, everyone who participated in the battle had paid a huge price. This was especially the case for Guigu and the other elder. Although the 2 of them were able to preserve their lives with the help of the complete version of the heavy pill, and the injuries on their physical bodies were also gradually recovering, and full recovery was within sight. The demonic aura that tainted their bodies couldn't be dispelled. Once the heavenly demon demonic aura came into contact with one's body, it could be said that it was incredibly troublesome. Those whose cultivation wasn't high enough, and whose determination wasn't strong enough wouldn't be far from becoming a demon. Even someone like Guigu, who had a high cultivation, would be constantly disturbed by the heavenly demon demonic aura. The moment one's state of mind became unstable, there was still the danger of being demonized. Regarding this, even Chu Yang was helpless. Fortunately, there was always a way out. Chu Yang couldn't do anything about the heavenly demon demonic aura. But that didn't mean that there were other people who could. For example, Tan Tan, the 3 Stars Divine King. Tan Tan himself had a supreme demonic body, which belonged to the ultimate demonic body. The heavenly demon demonic aura was extremely troublesome to ordinary people, but to Tan Tan, it was a very nutritious tonic. Therefore, as long as Tan Tan woke up and used the secret technique to absorb it, everything would be fine. Everyone sat cross-legged and circulated their energy, seizing every second to recover their strength. Right now they were in the wilderness, which was considered a remote area. Everyone was also in an unprecedented period of absolute weakness. If before they recovered their strength, an expert from the law enforcement team passed by here. Then it would really be effortless for them to wipe out the Tribulation Sword Master and the 3 Stars Divine Clan. If they were to be so lucky, everyone would definitely die with everlasting regrets. Everyone felt a sense of urgency. Among them, Chu Yang was in the best condition right now. Apart from concentrating on circulating his energy to recover his internal energy, he also deliberately released his divine senses to keep an eye on the surroundings, protecting everyone and preventing any accidents from happening. However, this thing was really very strange. Just as the old saying went, the good things didn't come true, but the bad things did. Just as everyone was on tenterhooks and desperately recovering their strength, a burst of wind-breaking sound rang out. A black figure rushed over rapidly from afar, as fast as the wind. A person with his hands behind his back, his long hair hanging loosely on both sides, came over. He was neither fast nor slow, leisurely and carefree. This person was the Dharma Supreme, who had returned from the capital. Previously, when the Dharma Supreme discovered that Ghost Sword and Devil Blade had broken the demonic seal before they died, he would rather die than let them off easily. Since the matter had already been done, there was no need for him to rush over. Instead, he chose to return directly. As he walked, he pondered over the matter. It was only when he discovered that dust had filled the sky that he came over to take a look at the situation. Of course, what really attracted him was that there was actually a faint aura of the heavenly demon here. This made the Dharma Supreme very surprised. Shit, people actually fought with this demon to this extent? They actually weren't killed. The Dharma Supreme was getting closer and closer. Chu Yang's divine senses could be said to be unparalleled in the world, at least among those below the heavenly layer. Naturally, he also sensed that somewhat familiar strong aura. He couldn't help but reveal a bitter smile with some despair. This time, it was really over. Chapter 1651. For a moment, Chu Yang didn't know what to feel. He sighed inwardly. How fucking unlucky. The one who came was actually the Dharma Supreme, the person he was most wary of and most afraid of meeting now. What should he do? With the help of the incomplete version of the heavy pill that he had consumed earlier, his originally completely dried up dantian had recovered a certain amount of energy. However, it was only less than half of what it was at its peak. This was a small drawback that came with a huge improvement in cultivation. Previously, as long as he swallowed the incomplete version of the heavy pill, his cultivation and energy would be instantly restored. And the condition of those 4 elders with lighter injuries seemed to be far worse than his. As for Gu Igu and the other elder, although they had consumed the complete version of the heavy pill, their previous injuries were really too severe. At present, they had only managed to preserve their lives and were far from recovering. Not to mention, there was still the disturbance of the demonic aura. Their battle prowess was basically negligible. The strength that he had recovered now was more than enough to deal with ordinary experts. Even if it was against an 8th-grade supreme martial artist, he was confident that he could win. In fact, he might even be able to contend with an ordinary 2nd-grade supreme martial artist. But if it was to deal with a super expert like the Dharma Supreme, who was even more powerful than a peak-grade supreme martial artist, they were completely and truly unable to withstand a single blow. Perhaps it was a bit of an exaggeration to say that they were unable to withstand a single blow. However, to say that they were definitely not his match, and that their chances of victory were slim was appropriate. If they were really discovered by the Dharma Supreme, then there would be no way for them to escape. Even if Chu Yang could barely escape, the others would definitely be dead. Especially Tan Tan, who was currently in the state of a living dead. However, the Dharma Supreme was currently heading straight in this direction. How could he not discover them? Chu Yang was burning with worry. For the first time, he actually felt that he was lucky. He hoped that a miracle would happen. He prayed in his heart. If a ghost were to appear at this time, feeling the scorching sun in the sky, Minister Chu sighed helplessly. Even if there were ghosts, it seemed like they wouldn't be willing to come out in this kind of weather. The speed of the Dharma Supreme's advance was extremely fast. Although it looked like he was taking a leisurely stroll, in fact, He was shrinking the ground and covering 1,000 miles with each step. In just a short while, he had already come close to where they were. As if he had sensed something, the Dharma Supreme suddenly increased his speed again. The next moment, the Dharma Supreme had already flown to the sky above this huge pit. As he looked around, he couldn't help but feel a wave of astonishment. Then, he felt a sense of satisfaction, as if a huge meat pie had fallen from the sky and landed on his hungry head. What a pleasant surprise! In that instant, even the Dharma Supreme couldn't help but find it hard to believe his own eyes. After taking a closer look, he finally confirmed that all of them were acquaintances. Moreover, they were all great enemies that he had spent a great deal of effort to eliminate. The most amazing thing was that these formidable enemies were all greatly weakened. He believed that as long as he made a move, he would be able to take them down easily. To be able to get rid of so many of them in one go, wouldn't it be a great joy? The heavens are really helping me. Pleased with himself, the Dharma Supreme could not help but throw his head back and roar with laughter. Ah! The wonders of the world. Sure enough, there were all kinds of strange things. If the will of the heavens does not belong to me, why would it send such a great gift to me? Gui Gu and the others' divine senses were far inferior to Chu Yang's. Moreover, they had yet to recover from their serious injuries. So it was only now that they realized that someone had arrived. Everyone was shocked to see that it was actually the Dharma Supreme who had arrived. They almost lost their breath. Chu Yang sighed. Although he was far from replying, he still stood up and said with a smile, "Lord Dharma Supreme, it's been a long time. I wonder if it would be embarrassing for you to still call you Lord Dharma Supreme? Or perhaps, it would be more appropriate to call you Heavenly Demon Lord?" The Dharma Supreme smiled with his hands behind his back. He floated into the huge pit and said with a faint smile, "I have always been lenient towards people who are about to die. Even if I let you have some advantage in words, will you be able to turn the situation around?" Chu Yang said, "Oh, is Lord Dharma Supreme really so confident? Legend Tribulation has stood tall for 10,000 years. Does Lord Dharma Supreme think that you will be an exception?" The Dharma Supreme smiled gently and said, "In front of me, Tribulation Sword Master, don't think of delaying any longer. Legend Tribulation. The legend has come to an end. Today is the last chapter. Be prepared." Before he finished speaking, almost without warning, he flew out and attacked Chu Yang violently. The moment he attacked, it was as if heaven and earth were falling apart. A long delay was fraught with problems. Chu Yang understood this, so he tried his best to stall for time. The Dharma Supreme had lived for tens of thousands of years longer than him, so he naturally understood this even more. No matter if there were reinforcements, killing this Tribulation Sword Master first was the most correct choice. The only enemies that were of no threat to him were always the dead. As long as he got rid of the Tribulation Sword Master, the so-called legend would be destroyed. Once a legend fell, everything would be easy. Chu Yang let out a long howl, turned his head and shouted, "Kill him! We can settle this once we reach the heavens." He looked as if there was still an ambush and victory was within his grasp. The Dharma Supreme, however, did not even turn his head. He was already in the air above Chu Yang, hundreds of punches and kicks raining down like a torrential waterfall. "You dare to play tricks in front of me? Her Lord Sword Master, you are really too childish. Your cheap tricks are all leftovers of mine." As Chu Yang spoke, the Tribulation Sword was already in his hand. His left hand silently took out the last complete version of the heavy pill and stuffed it into his mouth. He didn't want to use the last complete version of the heavy pill, at least not here. But now, he had no choice but to use it. With his current strength, he definitely couldn't block the Dharma Supreme's attack. Only when he was at his peak state would he have a chance to deal with the Dharma Supreme. The Tribulation Sword suddenly let out a sharp whistle, and the sword tip unleashed 4 moves at the same time. A ray of cold light pierces 10,000 feet. What harm is there in slaughtering the world? A sharp will buried deep will not change. A gathering of wind and clouds will become the emperor. These 4 moves were unleashed like a volcanic eruption. The Dharma Supreme's body floated in the air, his punches and kicks like the wind, completely suppressing the opponent with his strength. He attacked from a distance wildly. He definitely didn't give Chu Yang's tribulation sword a chance to get close to him. He kept hitting the sword light with his punches and kicks that were as heavy as mountains. The continuous heavy attacks were completed in the blink of an eye. Chu Yang let out a muffled groan, spitting out blood as he retreated. He somersaulted a few times, his face pale. The heavy pill in his mouth was swallowed with a gulp. A surge of pure medicinal power instantly spread. But the Dharma Supreme was already chasing closely. Lord Sword Master. What a pure tribulation sword technique. Compared to Junlai back then, it's probably much better. But, you seem to have forgotten who I am. Others may not understand the tribulation sword technique, but that definitely doesn't include me. Back then, I had more than once sparred with the tribulation sword technique. In terms of familiarity with the tribulation sword technique, I'm probably more familiar with it than you are. The Dharma Supreme's voice had a faint but distant and desolate nostalgia, but his mouth was laughing mournfully. Die. The Dharma Supreme struck again, and his power seemed to be even stronger than before. Moreover, although the previous attack was swift and fierce, it still belonged to the category of heavenly-level martial techniques. This time, the palm strike in the air actually brought out an unusually thick black fog, as if it was a giant axe that could split the heavens. It chopped towards Chu Yang, ferocious and terrifying. He sighed lightly. I really didn't expect the legendary Tribulation Sword Master to actually die in my hands. The meaning of this sentence was somewhat profound. Whoever killed the Tribulation Sword Master was a big deal, but it wasn't something too strange. Only if the Tribulation Sword Master died in the hands of the previous tribulation would it really make one speechless. Before he finished speaking, Chu Yang, who was still spurting blood and should have been completely immobile, suddenly leaped up, sword light flashing. The sword light was tenacious and dense, with a strong rebounding force, its power even stronger than before. The Dharma Supreme was taken aback for a moment, but immediately understood. He said, I almost forgot that the Tribulation Sword Master has another unique treasure other than the Tribulation Sword, the heavy pill. To recover so quickly, you must have consumed the most complete version, right? I wonder how many more heavy pills you can consume. How many waves of attacks can you withstand? Chu Yang didn't say anything, desperately performing the Tribulation Sword technique, hoping to hold on for as long as possible. He knew that this could be said to be the most dangerous moment since his rebirth. Even if he said one more word, he was afraid that it would deplete his energy. Why would he reply? It was absolutely courting death to argue with the former Tribulation Transcending stage think tank. Chu Yang had already tried once. He definitely wouldn't try a second time. What a good sword technique! The Dharma Supreme laughed. As he attacked, he slowly recited, Iron walls and bronze walls are never at rest. What more can one ask for in life? Clouds and clouds gather. As long as I'm alive, there will be no worries. Good sword technique. At this time, using these few moves is the most suitable. These 4 lines were the names of the Tribulation Sword technique, the moves that Chu Yang was using now. These few moves were a complete defense. The defense was impenetrable and impenetrable. The Dharma Supreme spun, and instantly turned into thousands of shadows, surrounding Chu Yang 50 feet away. The thousands of shadows moved as one, attacking wildly with their palms at the same time. It was as if countless monstrous waves had suddenly been set off in the sea, converging from all directions, and besieging the already tottering little boat in the middle. The Dharma Supreme knew that once the 4 strongest defensive moves of the Tribulation Sword technique were used, if it was just a single point of attack, and if it wasn't more than 10 times the strength of the opponent, it was impossible to break through. The past Tribulation Sword Masters had used this move to kill countless strong enemies.